Hey, I'm Cameron with Yates Contracting, and on this episode of Remodeling America, I'm going to show you how to turn this into that. So if you were interested, stay tuned. Alright, so in this episode of Remodeling America, I'm pretty much going to show you what we do for a lot of our customers, and that's putting in a lot of these wood mantles. People are really into the wood mantles. The thicker, the better on these mantles. So the bigger chunk of wood that you can put up there, the better. So sometimes we have to find our own, we have to source our own from some of the suppliers that we use. And sometimes some of these homeowners, they have a chunk of wood that they have. They got it, this particular customer got it from his dad years ago, or from a barn that got torn down, whatever it is. So they'll give us this piece of wood and they say, hey, we want this as a mantle. So we take it back to the shop, we take a look at it. You'll have some problems that need to be figured out. You've got to plane it down. You have to joint the side, give it one nice straight edge, and a lot of people like to leave that live edge on there. So in this particular one, we're pretty much already getting it pretty much set up, but if you can see, we've got it on the table right now, and what happens is there's a pretty big dip in it. We've already cut it down once, but you can see if you push on one side how much it goes up and down. So basically what we need to do first is we actually need to plane this piece down. The sides are okay, we'll joint them later, which basically means put one straight side on it, but right now we wanted to plane it down. So the first step is you need to get it on a really flat surface, see exactly what the problem is so you can attack it. So with this one, it's got a really big bow in it, and it pretty much goes from side to side. It was about 3/4 of an inch on the full piece, so we cut it down on either side, so we only had to really plane off about 1/4 inch. All right. So what we're gonna do is to run it through the planer. Now we've got a pretty decent setup here. Basically, we've got on the feed side of the planer, it's not set in place, but on the feed side, we've got a pretty long table, and that's pretty much on the exit side, but on the this is the feed side here, and planer sits just in here. We run our boards through, but the key is to have a nice flat surface at the beginning and a decently flat surface on the back side. So what we're going to do here is, as soon as we have everything set up, we got to figure out how much we need to take off this board. Now what we figured out is that we need to take off about 1/4 inch or so total. So what we like to do is put some shims, just with some hot glue on the bottom side of whatever it is we're planing. So what the planer will do is it'll push down as hard as it can. So if you have, a big bow in something, or a cup, or around anything that the planer can push down and take out, it will. And all you're going to be doing is basically putting your plane piece through, and all it's going to be doing is making it a little bit smaller, but all the way across is not going to make it any flatter. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to put something to push against the planer wheels, just to give it a little bit more pressure against there, so it doesn't just continue that same round, that same bow to it. So what you need to do is you need to be able to put something there to kind of stop it. So what we like to do is we like to use shims for that. So as soon as we figure out what we could shim up to make it nice and flat, we always take off the center part of that bow first. So you want to take off the top. So if it's rounded this way, you want to take off the top first. So that means running basically the shim part on the bottom, shimming up to that top piece. So I'll kind of show you what I mean here in a minute. All right. So on this piece in particular, here's the side that it kind of dips down. All right, and the other side obviously goes up. So what we do is we put these shims in place, depending on how much we need to shim it up to make this bottom run flat. Okay, so what we do is we put these in, just hot glue for now, and we measured them out, set them in place, so that when this pretty much gets flipped over, flip that over for you. So when this gets flipped over, you can probably see a little bit here, but you can see that space that runs all the way across there. That's pretty much what we're going to be taking off of the top. And then when we get a nice flat edge on the top, okay, so about half of that comes out, maybe about an 1/8 inch or so of that comes out, we're going to flip it over and then take it off the two sides. All right, so these shims serve a really good purpose, because if not, the planer wheels would just push this down and it wouldn't take that bow out, especially on lighter, softer woods. This is actually walnut, and it's a really hard wood, but it still probably would take it out and not give us as flat of a piece. So as soon as you have your shims in place, I'll show you when we get the planer in, but as soon as you have your shims in place, you can run your board down, make sure you get it flat enough, and then flip it over to the other side so that now you can take the shims off, but after you flipped it over to the other side, you'll have a much flatter, smoother surface. And you could add some shims if needed, but the key is to get a perfectly flat surface on this side first and then flip it over. So we're going to be taking a little bit off this board, but it's really the only way to give us that nice flat look. Some people don't want the flat look. They want as natural as you can get it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But on this particular one, they do want the flat, and they just want to have kind of this live, edge on the front of it. So I'll pretty much show you how that works through the planer.
All right, so I guess first I want to say sorry about how the shop looks right now. We have a lot of projects going on, so it's pretty messy. But basically what you're going to see is, like I was talking about, we're going through and first taking off that top piece of that bow on that piece, and we're going to run a few passes through. You don't really want to take more than about a 32nd of an inch off. And when you'll see on the front of the planers that has a gauge, and it'll tell you how much you're taking off. So we've already run it through. We got that first top of the bow pretty much out, and now what we need to do is flip it over to the other side. And here what I'm doing is I'm putting in, we just had some spare shims, so here what I'm doing is I'm putting in some shims to stop the edges from doing the exact same thing I was trying to stop the center from doing before. Because we don't want to take off make the whole top flat first, because what it'll do is it'll just make it really thin piece. So we try to take off about half and half. So here what I'm doing is I'm trying to just give a little bit of support to those edges that are, those little wings that are up on the sides, so that when it goes through the planer, it doesn't push it down. All right. So now we're going to run it through a few passes through. It's always key, keep your hands away from the inside of the planer. I mean, I can't tell you that enough. So with this planer, I like this planer a lot. It's about 13-inch wide. That lets you push through there, and it's about 6 inches tall. And it has the 4 points of contact, which I like a lot. So what you're gonna find that you're gonna do with this setup, I like using the hot glue. It's temporary, it comes off really easily. There's a lot of different ways people do it. They'll use some sleds sometimes with adjustments on it. We just happen to have a really good setup with a nice long feed and a nice long exit table. If you have that, then that's definitely the best way of doing it. I like adding the shims to it because it takes out any wobble, if you have a twist in there, anything. So we're going to feed it through a couple times. Now, most of the time I don't like adjusting the wheel, basically the height of the blades while it's going, but sometimes you just need the wheels themselves to actually grab the wood. But if you do adjust it when you run your piece through there, always make sure to run it through one more time in that same height so you get a nice level plane on it. So each time you can always plane more. That's the key. Just don't think that you have to plane a whole lot at one time. So you can always come back and you can always run it through one more time. You just want to make sure it's right at about a 32nd of an inch, depending on the size of the lumber that you're taking out each time. And that way that you don't take too much and you don't regret it. So we just keep feeding it through, and then as soon as we get a nice flat edge, we flip it onto the other side, and hopefully by then we get ourselves a nice flat piece of lumber. And this one's pretty much almost done.
Alright, so we finished up planing our piece. We're about ready to join it, but I just kind of want to show you a few things and give you a couple tricks and just show you a couple things about planing these. So when you are planing them, like I had said before, you want to make sure you take out that real center part of the bow first, then flip it over, and then you have to make sure you use the shims on the bottom, and then we take off the sides. That's usually what we do. And then close to the end, you might find yourself flipping from side to side to get a real nice flat finish. This one had a real big bow too. We took out pretty much as much as we could without losing a lot of thickness. This is what it looks like afterwards. So you get to see a lot more of the grain in here now. You don't have any of that rough edges to it. And the next thing that we'll do is we will have to plane a little bit off the side. You have to kind of figure out how much you want to keep. But now that you see exactly what you're looking at, you want to keep the piece as long as you can to start with, because you don't know what kind of imperfections you're going to uncover, especially how far down you go. So now that we have it the size we need to, we're going to cut a little off of one side. We're going to leave the knot in here, and this is pretty much going to be the finished piece. We're going to stain this to be the same color of the built-ins, but you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. You can clear coat it, you can put some just oils. There's plenty of different kind of coatings you can do to really bring it out, but I always recommend anything that you cut off, plane that as well, or keep any kind of chunk and sand it down, and always test your stains, test your finishes on there before you start coating this whole thing, especially it's expensive and you've already worked so much on it. So test it on a small piece first, and then you can kind of see it from there. But this is how ours turned out. Here's the top side, and here's the bottom side. It's got a really cool grain to it. It's a piece of walnut, and I think it's going to look really, really good in this space. You know, you'll get your hardwood and a little bit of the sapwood, but I think it just really adds a nice look to it. Everybody has kind of different tastes, but that is exactly how you plane down a piece of wood and use it for your mantle. So if you liked the video, you know, you can subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notification. We'll let you know when we're coming out with something new. So, my name's Cameron Yates. This is Remodeling America.